So here we are again after 2 weeks. It's actually not entirely true, Sjimi, because we just recorded a session which we're not going to publish
This
because
is
it went
take
all
3,
in.
right? Normally we do it
It's
always one take. This is
I know,
this
I
is quite
know,
abnormal.
but it's okay. The previous we recorded was on AI, but it was maybe too much of AI. So let's do something totally different.
Yeah.
Um, you have an
Actually,
idea?
I can kick it off. I think this is a bit different, but actually, I don't know if people know. I think you've posted it maybe somewhere on LinkedIn already, but you've been working on a book, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as always, I'm always skeptical when Andreas says I'm going to write a book. I'm like, do we have time for that? But hey, I think it's a really cool subject, and maybe I want to talk a bit about it today and tie it to AI later on. But first, what is the book about, Andreas? Why did you start it?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've written already one book together with a former colleague, but this I think is a bit different, where this is really probably 20 years of my experience written in a book. And I've always been on the edge between engineering or product and engineering in the business side of things. I think also that's what we as a company are very good at, is bridging that. So the book is called Bridging Code and Capital. Um, and it's trying to translate engineering trade-offs or decisions in engineering teams that you have to take into economical formulas. So,
It's
for
about the money,
example,
right?
yeah, it's about the money. It's pretty abstract. Like, what's the cost of a bug? Of course, you cannot really exactly calculate for each bug what the cost would be. But I try to distill all the elements of the cost of a bug. Right. Of course, there's the time to fix it, but there is also the coordination cost. There is the possible churn you have with customers. Um, so these types of things, and I think I have like 10 or 11 the costs of, like, there is also the cost of a refactor, the cost of a bad hire, these kind of things. And so I try to give an economical formula for each of those, showing all the different elements that are part of that cost. And for me, it's interesting from an engineering manager or CTO perspective, where basically you start thinking broader about it, and also from an economical perspective, where, for example, if you have a bug, you think, okay, I mean, what's the problem with just having a bug? We fix it and it's good. While there's probably someone in customer success spending days dealing with customers that are facing this bug, and which is also something that you need to take into account as a cost of that bug. But also from the other side, as a manager, non-technical manager, CFO, whatever, in a company or on a board, to understand better, like, what is making engineering so hard? Why don't they indeed just start over from scratch, right? Isn't that a lot simpler? Because they know what they need to build, so just build it. And there I explain, I mean, why probably it's not a good idea. What are all the different elements that come into account when you try to do that?
Yeah.
So
It's
it comes from both
basically,
angles.
yeah. So I obviously have proofread it, and basically it's like taking into account like these decision factors into a decision you're going to make, whether it's a rewrite, whether it's a
Yeah.
hire, and all of that. So I think it's really cool, and I think it's going to be a tool, or it should be a tool at least for technical leaders, engineers, CFOs, CEOs to be able to communicate with each other, right?
Yeah, that's the idea behind it.
Yeah.
And it was hard to. I mean, I just sent in the manuscript on Tuesday to the editor. It should be published somewhere in September, I think. For me, it was very hard to find the balance between the theoretical side of things, right, and still put in some practical or, yeah, anecdotal
Yep.
examples as well. So I've tried to weave it in. I'll see what the editor says.
In a way, we have a lot of anecdotes, right? Because we can tap into our existing client network, but it's our past clients as well. But it's always hard to find that correct
Yeah, and also,
anecdote, I guess, or story to
yeah.
tell.
Yeah, and also jumping between companies and having to explain every company every time
Yeah,
again. What I did now is have like two fictional companies that I try to apply to each of those
yeah.
and show the difference in decision making
Okay. But
between those
obviously, you
companies.
started you started writing on this book. I think a bit more than a year ago.
In October, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Uh,
mean, the idea was already in my mind for like
yeah,
five
you
years,
had
right?
it. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
already the seed was already there. But then, of course, we have this whole AI revolution, let's say in November last year. It really kicked off where it changed the nature of that you say how we work as made with love, like our engineers work, it really changed everything. Then obviously it was already before that AI was coming out, but that's like an inflection point in AI. What does that mean? Because you've written this book like based on your past 20 years of experience, how you see these problems,
Yeah.
but then you have this huge change maker multiplier AI coming in. Did you have to rewrite parts of the book? Did it have a big impact?
I put in one paragraph. I think more or less,
Okay.
or one section, maybe three paragraphs. I don't know. It's a very good question. As of course, other proofreaders also asked me that question. In the end, basically, it just changes the amounts in the book, right? It changes the time it costs to build a feature, right? But it does not change the elements in the formula, right?
Yeah, the things
Um,
you have to take into account stay the same. The factors
exactly.
that make up a
And even
decision.
it shifts a bit. For example, let's go back to the cost of a bug. Maybe it's maybe the resolution of a bug will be faster, right? But it could also be with AI that you didn't write the feature yourself and that AI wrote the feature, and that there was a bug with it and AI cannot find it because it wrote it itself, and you need to start debugging it manually and you have no clue what you're debugging, right? So it goes both ways. For example, with refactoring, there you could say, yeah, I was just having a call with someone about that. With the lead, you could say refactoring goes a lot easier, right? Just throw an agent at it and it starts doing it. That's true. But while you're refactoring, of course, you want to take into account the business logic that you have. You have existing customers, you have a migration. If, for example, if you want to do a big bang rewrite, you need to have a migration of existing customers. You need to do all the communication around it. You also want to look into what features do we have? Do we still need them? All these things, they're still valid, right?
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's if I may interject, I think that's an interesting example. What you mentioned there is that people will say that refactoring has become easier, but on the other
exactly.
hand, people also say that rewrites are easier. So in a way, it doesn't change for both decisions. You still okay.
No,
Imagine the writing is not the problem anymore. What are the other factors that you have to take into account?
but that's that. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about it because I could have also thrown it in the bin, right? The whole book, because I could have said, yeah, actually we don't know, or maybe indeed the whole industry changed. It did, right? But these things are still valid, and it's the fundamentals of software engineering are still valid, independent of if it's agents doing the work or developers doing the work. And for example, I have the cost of a developer right in there. Of course, that's one of the elements. If you had the work be done by agents, there's also a cost involved, right? And we see, I mean, these days that it's not cheap, right? So
Yeah.
it could be that you also have like the same kind of salary for the person. It's just not a person; it's an agent doing it. So I don't think it changed a lot, and that's of course what makes the book very strong. I mean, there is some references in the book, for example, that go back to the 80s, right? So things that were valid back then are still valid today as well. Um, so of course it changed the values, but it didn't change the formulas.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
basically it.
And for that matter, if you see the now Anthropic brought out its newest model and it's going to change the pricing again, it's like it's only going upwards with the pricing. So I guess the cost of agentic development is only going to increase, or we're going to expect more of it. So yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I was thinking maybe just to comment on that, we are probably getting to a point at where some of the outsourcing to agent doesn't make sense anymore because it becomes too expensive.
yeah,
So of course it's a lot easier. You don't have to hire someone. So you don't have to manage them. But it's and I'm thinking like in the last days, what's I guess the next step is going to be that we need to be able to run the
yeah.
models locally, um,
Maybe
because
that's
otherwise it's not affordable anymore.
it's maybe a
Yeah.
bit too soon, but that could be a good additional chapter in your book, like the cost of running an agentic pipeline or agentic
That's a good one.
development,
I
comparing
could
it to
probably write a
the
blog
human
post
cost.
on that. Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. I think thanks for that. It was a bit of a different episode about your upcoming book, so we can expect it end of
End of
year,
September, I think. We
end
we
of
go on a
September.
retreat in October, and they promised me it would be done by then. So I've handed in everything, and they need to do their stuff. So we'll see what happens. If I don't have
Cool.
to rewrite the whole thing, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, ambitious. I like it. So thanks everyone for checking in as well, and See you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.